Okay, so get this. There's this lawsuit, and it's pretty wild. It alleges Jay-Z and Diddy, yeah, Sean Combs, were involved in raping a 13-year-old back in 2000.
Whoa.
Yeah, crazy, right? We found this YouTube video, and it really dives into a federal judge's ruling on it. And
Right.
it's like, oh man, it's a lot to unpack. The judge decided the accuser can stay anonymous for now, which is, I mean, it's sparking so much debate.
Yeah, I can see why. Anonymity in these cases, especially with such high-profile figures involved, it's a minefield, really. It's going to set a precedent, for sure.
Total minefield. So the accuser, she's going by Jane Doe, right?
Right.
What's she saying exactly happened?
So the lawsuit claims that back in 2000, after the MTV Music Awards, there was this after party, and Jane Doe was there.
Okay.
She's alleging that she was drugged at the party and then raped by both Jay-Z and Diddy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's even mention of another celebrity being there, but they're not named.
And how is Jay-Z responding to all of this?
Well, his team's calling it a total blackmail attempt, saying the whole story is completely made up. His lawyers are really going after it hard, trying to get Jane Doe's identity revealed.
I read about that, but the judge actually pushed back pretty hard, calling their efforts a waste of judicial resources, right?
Yeah. And he even said it was unlikely to benefit his client, meaning Jay-Z. That's pretty strong language coming from a judge.
Definitely. What do you make of that?
It's definitely a statement. Judges have a lot of power in managing their cases, and that public rebuke, it could be a way to try and discourage these kinds of tactics in future cases.
Interesting. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the whole anonymity thing. Why is that such a big deal legally?
It's tricky because courts, they can grant different levels of protection. It's not just like all or nothing, it's more of a spectrum. The judge here, he might be using Jane Doe's anonymity strategically.
Strategically, how do you mean?
Like maybe it's temporary while more evidence is being gathered. It's definitely a complex legal area.
It's like we're in this whole new era with the #MeToo movement and everything. This case feels like it's touching on so many raw nerves.
It totally is. This case is happening against this backdrop of a huge cultural shift.
Right.
I mean, the #MeToo movement has forced everyone to look at these power dynamics, especially in entertainment and beyond. And people are a lot more aware of the challenges that survivors face when they come forward. There's a much bigger demand for accountability now.
Yeah, I feel like this case could have consequences way beyond just the music industry.
For sure. I think it could definitely have ripple effects, impact how future accusations are handled, not just in music, but in other industries too.
It's almost like this one case is a perfect example of a much bigger conversation, right?
Exactly. And the judge's ruling, it just adds this whole other layer to it.
How so?
Well, letting Jane Doe stay anonymous, even temporarily, it could really empower other survivors to come forward. But then critics, they'll say that anonymity, it makes it harder for the accused to defend themselves, could lead to unfair trials. It's a really delicate balance.
I get that. And the judge even mentioned that, like, down the road, Jane Doe might have to reveal her identity. Why would that be?
Well, legally, both sides need to be able to make their case fairly, right?
Right.
So revealing Jane Doe's identity, it could allow Jay-Z's lawyers to investigate her claims more thoroughly, interview witnesses, see how credible she is. It's all part of due process.
I get the legal reasons, but I just keep thinking about what it would be like for her, to come forward with allegations like this, especially against people like Jay-Z and Diddy. That takes so much guts.
Absolutely.
And then to have your identity revealed and have everyone scrutinizing you, not just the courts, but the public, the media, that's got to be incredibly difficult.
Oh, it's a huge burden. The video we watched even mentioned that sometimes accusers faced with that pressure, they choose to drop their lawsuits completely rather than go through that. It's really sad.
It's heartbreaking. So where does this all leave us? What are the key takeaways here for our listeners? What should we be keeping in mind as this whole thing unfolds?
Well, I think this case really forces us to consider a fundamental question. How do we balance the rights of the accused with the needs and the safety of the accuser, especially when you bring in public opinion? It's a question that goes way beyond this specific case.
For sure. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
Right.
It's obvious this case is far from over. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, both legally and, culturally. What would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to keep in mind?
I think the most important thing to remember is that there are real people at the heart of this story, right? Jane Doe, Jay-Z, Diddy, they're not just names in a headline.
Right.
They're individuals whose lives are being deeply affected by these allegations. So as this unfolds, I think it's important to try and approach it with nuance and empathy, recognizing how complex it all is.
Well said.
Thank you.
To our listeners, stay tuned. This one's going to be a wild ride.